Welcome to your channel, Warrior Mind, where we dive deep into books that change the way we see the world and explore ideas that can make you more powerful and wiser in life. Today, we're talking about one of the most controversial and impactful books on power and strategy, The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Have you ever wondered how some people manage to achieve their goals with such finesse, while others seem to struggle in the same place? Do you think power is just luck or coincidence? In this book, Robert Greene reveals 48 fundamental laws of power, backed by historical studies and real-life stories from the lives of great leaders, emperors, and strategists. In this video, we'll begin our journey with the first two laws of these principles, laws that will change the way you think about dealing with others and achieving your goals. Are you ready to uncover the secrets that can make you smarter and more strategic in life? If the answer is yes, stay with us until the end, because these laws might just be the key you've been searching for. Chalio. 1. Never outshine the master judgment. Always make those above you feel comfortably superior. In your desire to please and impress them, do not go too far in displaying your talents, or you might accomplish the opposite, inspire fear and insecurity. Make your masters appear more brilliant than they are, and you will attain the heights of power. But did you know that some who tried to apply these laws paid a heavy price? Today's story carries a harsh lesson for those who miscalculate the rules of power. It's the story of Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister of King Louis XIV, who lived a life of luxury and extravagance, surrounded by lavish parties, women, poetry, and endless wealth. Fouquet was beloved by the king for his skill in managing financial affairs, but he made a fatal mistake that cost him the rest of his life. In 1661, when the prime minister passed away, Fouquet expected to take over the position, but the king decided to abolish the role entirely. Determined to regain the king's favor, Fouquet decided to do something unprecedented, a legendary party, unlike anything the world had ever seen. The apparent reason for the party was to celebrate the construction of his new palace, but the real goal was to show his devotion to King Louis XIV, who was the guest of honor that night. By all accounts, the party was an unforgettable event. World-class musicians composed special melodies to honor the king, a private tour of the luxurious palace, and breathtaking firework displays that lit up the sky. But when the party ended in the early hours of the morning, something unexpected happened. The very next day, Fouquet was arrested on charges of embezzling state funds. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a nightmare that lasted 20 years. Fouquet was sent to one of the most isolated prisons in France, where he spent the last 2 decades of his life in solitary confinement, far from everything he loved: parties, women, poetry, and wealth. So, what was Fouquet's fatal mistake? And what can we learn from his story to avoid his tragic fate? Stay tuned to find out. January 28, 4:23 p.m. Tony, The Fatal Mistakes of Fouquet, a success story turned tragedy. 1. Showing excessive superiority, the moment that ruined his career. Fouquet, with all his brilliance, didn't hesitate to showcase his skills and abilities in the most dazzling way. He organized an event so spectacular that it left everyone in awe. But the problem was, this brilliance wasn't just a display of excellence. It became a double-edged sword. The king, who was watching everything, felt that Fouquet's superiority posed a direct threat to his authority and status. Do you think Fouquet knew that his talent would be the reason for his downfall? 2. Ignoring the king's feelings, the unforgivable mistake. Despite his intelligence, Fukohe didn't stop to consider how his success might affect the king's emotions. Jealousy and resentment began to creep into the king's heart, especially when he saw Fukohe receiving all the admiration and praise. Could Fukohe have avoided this fate if he had been more cautious? The shocking outcome. From the top to the bottom. Instead of being rewarded for his skills and creativity, Fukohe was exiled and his career was completely destroyed. All because the king felt threatened by someone more talented than himself. Imagine your excellence being the reason for your downfall. The lesson learned: the art of dealing with authority. This story teaches us a valuable lesson. When dealing with those in positions of power, you must be careful in how you showcase your abilities. Don't reveal all your cards at once, and always make them feel superior and respected. Remember, showing too much excellence can sometimes backfire. Rule 2. Never trust too much in friends. Learn to use enemies. Beware of friends. They are the first to betray you out of envy. Friendship can ruin their loyalty to you and make them domineering over you. However, if you employ someone who was once your enemy, he will strive to prove his worth and loyalty to you, and will be more faithful than friends. The truth is that a friend is always more dangerous and harmful than an enemy. If you do not have an enemy, you must create one. This law advises against relying entirely on friends, as they may betray you out of jealousy or greed. Instead, enemies can be more loyal if won over, as they will try to prove their worth. In the book, the author recounts the story of Michael III, who ascended to the throne of the Byzantine Empire in the mid-9th century AD, succeeding his mother, Empress Theodora, who had been overthrown and exiled. Leading this conspiracy was Michael's cunning and ambitious uncle. Michael, inexperienced and surrounded by conspirators, assassins, and opportunists, needed someone he could trust, and found no one but his dear friend Basil, a poor man who was merely in charge of the royal stables. Michael had met Basil years earlier during a visit to the stables when a horse escaped and attacked Michael, but Basil intervened and saved him. Impressed by Basil, Michael elevated him from obscurity, appointing him head of the royal stables and sending him to the finest Byzantine schools. Basil quickly transformed from a peasant to a member of the elite. When Michael ascended the throne, he appointed Basil as his advisor, as he trusted no one else. Over time, Basil gained more power and influence in the Byzantine court. Basil's problem was his greed for money, as Michael doubled his salary several times. Basil gathered powerful allies around him and saw Michael's uncle as a potential threat. Basil decided to eliminate him, poisoning Michael's mind until he agreed to assassinate his uncle. During a horse race, Basil approached Michael's uncle Bardas and fatally stabbed him in the crowd. Shortly afterward, Basil requested to succeed Bardas as commander of the army to consolidate his control over the kingdom. Years later, Michael faced financial difficulties and asked his friend to repay some of the money he had borrowed during their friendship. To his shock, Basil refused. It was then that Michael realized the predicament he had created for himself. A man who had once worked in the stables had amassed wealth, power, and connections that the king himself did not possess. Weeks later, Michael awoke one night to find himself surrounded by soldiers, with Basil watching as they stabbed him. Basil then proclaimed himself emperor, parading through the streets with Michael's head on a lance. Michael's realization came too late. He never imagined his friend would betray him. No one expects a friend to be a traitor. This story illustrates how excessive trust in friends can be dangerous. Friends may exploit this trust for their personal gain, while enemies who are won over can be more loyal and eager to prove their worth. Had Michael relied on his uncle, his uncle would have worked to prove his worth and act in the interest of the family and the entire kingdom. Subscribe the channel to increase your mentality.